Hello and welcome to another episode of Business on the Wire. It has been turbulent for the Indian economy and economies worldwide, but some sectors stand to be hit perhaps harder than others. The auto industry is one clear example which has been struggling with sales and offtake in the last couple of quarters. Maruti is doing something different though. It's actually come forward and partnered with a much smaller player to start producing ventilators. To talk about that and to talk about where the industry and the economy may be headed over the next few quarters, joining me now is the chairman of Maruti Suzuki in India, RC Bhargav. Mr. Bhargav, thank you very much for joining in today. Thank you very much, Mr. Bhargav, for taking time out and speaking to us in these difficult times. First, I want to talk about the new, not venture, but the new sort of project that Maruti is getting into and trying to support the cause for more ventilators. Could you walk us through the timeline, sir, on how things are progressing on that front with your partner, Agva Healthcare?
Well, it's just, I think, just a little over a week that government approached us and asked us if we could get into ventilator production. So we did a little bit of study on what this involved. And the conclusion we reached was that if in the time period which was available to us, we wanted to produce the ventilators in some substantial numbers, then we could only do it by taking one of the existing companies who had an approved ventilator design and who was, in a sense, already in production in a small way, and then work with that company to scale up the volumes of production. Because the basic facts are that we do not have technology for a ventilator. Getting that technology from anywhere outside and then getting the component specifications and developing those components and getting all the drawings and things would take far too long for any meaningful results to come out of it. So we then found this company, Agva. He was on a list which the Ministry of Pharmaceuticals had sent to us. And he was a very small startup producer of ventilators. But his ventilator had apparently been found okay by the authorities in the government. And he had been actually given an order to produce 10,000 ventilators by the end of, actually middle of May or something. So we got hold of this guy and convinced him that it would be both in the national interest as well as his interest if instead of his trying to meet the whole production requirements, which we didn't think he would be able to do, he tied up with Maruti. I said the result of this will be that you will actually be able to scale up your operations. You will get access to all our production and quality and productivity know-how, and you will get all of this for free. And so in the long term, this would be of immense benefit to you if you want to go into a big company and become a global player. So the person who owns this company, Professor Vash, he agreed. So we have started working with him. In the time which we've had now, this last week, let us say, we have been able to line up all the domestic producers of components. And they are organized and producing ventilators, the components, and they're getting them tested and validated. And we think that scaling up domestic supplies to get up to a level of 400 a day, which would roughly be 10,000 a month, is now taken care of. The problem we have is on the imported components. Because as you know, there are many components, electronics, particularly in India, which are not available. Professor Vash had been getting these components from China. But Professor Vash had no stock of any materials with him. And we found that there were other issues of space and manpower and various things connected with buying components from vendors Many of his vendors were very, very small people who couldn't really supply at the rate of 10,000 a month. So we had to look for new sources, all which we have done. But the imported parts is now still a problem. We've arranged financing for Professor Vesh, which he didn't have at that time, but he's got an advance from the government agency, which has placed an order on him. We have managed, I think it'll be done today, a line of credit from a bank will be opened to him, which the banks were initially totally averse to doing. But with our intervention, they've been persuaded to open a line of credit for him. And Professor Vash himself has brought in some money on his own. So the finance part is taken care of. We've managed the manpower part of it because we've got workers from two of our vendors, Subros and Motherson, who are working to do the assembling of the vendors because the people who were with the Agua and Professor Vesh, many of them have gone away. They were inadequate numbers. We have also, Motherson has also been very helpful. They've given us space in Noida, where this man's factory is located, a much, much bigger space than what he has, where we can do this assembly and get up to 400 a day. So all of that has been done. Now we found that the shipment from China, the small orders which he had placed, even those are getting stuck because of some problems in the Chinese end. Aircraft not available, customs clearance not being done, space not being provided, some of the other thing. So that is the area we are struggling with. We hope that in the next 3 or 4 days, this problem will be sorted out. And if that happens and we start getting the regular flow of materials from China, we will step up to this rate of 10,000 a month in about 2 weeks' time.
So in 2 weeks' time is when you expect to hit the rate of 400.
Provided the Chinese angle is sorted out.
Sure, sir. Is there a
We are
sense?
also, sorry, I must add, we are also now, we've approached other agencies and we are looking for alternative sources of materials also. Whether it comes from Japan, comes from Korea, it comes from anywhere else, we are looking for those sources also. Because I don't want to bank 100% on the Chinese source.
When you do hit that run rate of 400 ventilators per day, Mr. Bhargava, is there some kind of target which has been set forth by the government or the ministry as well in terms of how much this should ideally scale up to? And that would, of course, imply how long Maruti would want to remain engaged with this particular foray.
The government is very, very proactive in this matter. And almost daily, I get calls from 2 or 3 secretaries to government in DPIIT, in pharmaceuticals, in textiles, on how progress is happening and what can they do to help us. I've never seen government being so proactive and so helpful in getting this done. And I've promised them that, look, please help us on the Chinese end, which they are doing, and there are government civil aviation is working on this to get this supplies in, and because they want to know when will we give them 10,000 ventilators. They want more. So it's not a problem that side. The question is of sorting out this one major bottleneck of the Chinese.
My question more was, what do you think the larger target might be once you scale up to 400 per day? Is there some kind of directive that the government has indicated in terms of how many?
Actually, I don't know. I don't think anybody knows at this point of time what would be the immediate need for ventilators in this country. I've heard some of the doctors speaking, and it could be 50,000 ventilators. It depends on how the virus spread is controlled and to what extent the serious cases develop and don't develop. If we have something like what this Tablighi happened, that creates a very different dimension. Yes. Otherwise, the way the government has been going, the way Mr. Modi has been telling everybody to function. If we do that, then I don't think that we too much of a problem in this matter. But unfortunately, everybody doesn't follow.
At this point, Mr. Bhargava, what is your sense of how long Maruti will be engaged in this foray? Do you think this is a 12-month journey or longer than that? And is there any
Well,
capital?
we will do it as long as the nation needs the ventilators. Once we find that the national need for dealing with this emergency is over, and we find that Professor Vash has built an organization which will be able to take over this and run the show the way it should be run and make ventilators, we'll walk out because this is not our business. We are doing this as a activity to support the national effort. We are not in it for the long term or for any other purpose. We are not in it for money. We are doing all what we are doing as a contribution to the effort. And the production of ventilators, of course, in the country will continue to be required. In addition, there's a large export market. And the ventilator which Professor Vash has designed, which Agua is making, is a very low cost ventilator. And because of its cost, I think it'll have a very good market in a lot of the developing world and maybe elsewhere also. I mean, it all depends on how it functions because we have yet to see the functioning of this ventilator on a large scale and for prolonged periods of time. There are a few of the hundreds of these ventilators in the market, but we really don't have a good idea of how they function.
Mm.
In addition to this, Mitali, we are also involved now in developing an organization for the sales and service of the ventilator. Because providing ventilators and not having an adequate arrangement for their maintenance and for spare parts will negate the entire effort which we are doing. I've heard that there are some 20, 30,000 imported ventilators and very costly ventilators which are lying unused in the country. And I don't know why they're lying unused, but my guess would be they're lying unused largely because some spare part is not available, something has broken down, nobody knows how to repair it or maintain it. And that is a situation we are very keen to avoid. And so we are training our mechanics from the service workshops in the field so that they can become people who can go and maintain these ventilators. And we will try and build up as soon as we can a stock of spare parts to support.
Will there be capital support as well from Maruti, Mr. Bhargava? And have you had the opportunity to speak with your peers in the auto industry? Will there be other manufacturers, for example, who come forth and support the government in the healthcare system this way?
I don't think at this point we have run across any situation where any significant capital support is required for the manufacture of the ventilators. But let's see as we go along how things develop. But I don't think that situation will arise.
To my other point, sir, do you see other members of the auto industry stepping forth and supporting the healthcare needs at this point in a similar fashion?
Mahindra's is doing it in a very big way. You must be aware of what they are doing. Tatas are involved in this. I believe Honda is trying to do something. I think everybody today is pitching in to the best of their effort. I don't think any auto company today will say that no, we don't want to support the national effort. I don't think that's going to happen.
Uh, you are not just an auto industry veteran, Mr. Bhargava. You're also somebody who has seen several waves and ebbs and flows in, the business cycle itself. What's I think shocked everyone a little bit is that they've never seen this kind of supply side freeze, What is your sense of how economies generally and ours specifically will emerge from this COVID crisis?
See, it's a very unique situation which has developed. And it's going to take some time for people to understand what needs to be done to revive the economy after this. Because nobody has experienced what this is happening. We were already in somewhat of a depression before we just started. We were in a downturn anyway, I shouldn't call it a depression. And then this has come along. But the advantage of this is that it gives everybody, the policymakers in government, the economists, the industry, an opportunity to rethink the way business has been done in India and the way we need to do business if we are going to recover from what has happened and recover quickly and in a big way. And my belief is fundamentally that we have to change our entire management style and culture of working. We have to look much more towards the East and the Japanese management systems, where the whole system is based on a partnership relationship between the owners and the management and the workers. And it creates a very egalitarian kind of society. And all this hierarchy of caste and rank based on various, whether it's wealth or whether it's based on your academic qualifications or based on anything else, all of that goes away. And people jointly work for the benefit of the nation. No individual needs to have unlimited wealth. And that's what I think the Japanese understood before anybody else, that how much can you use of the wealth which you have? And then why do you accumulate wealth? Why not use it for the growth of the company and of the nation? If I take 100 crores a year, what do I do with 100 crores a year? For my needs, I don't need a small fraction of that even. But if the balance of that money it remains in the company and used for the growth of the company, then the whole nation benefits and ultimately I benefit because my company becomes bigger. So I think these are the kinds of things which we have to look at, that the growth of people's businesses and companies must become the priority, not personal wealth. At the same time, the government has to recognize that for growth, there has to be creation of a demand in the economy. And in that, some of the old socialist ways of thinking about taxation, and this is consumed by the rich and this is consumed by the poor, and so taxes should be that way. Our taxes on manufactured products are extremely high. So I think all of that requires to be relooked now, that we cannot continue with what we developed when we mixed up socialism with industrial growth. The two have to be dealt with separately. I'm all for an egalitarian society. Absolutely. I am not in favor of these wide disparities. But at the same time, there is no question that you cannot create a manufacturing industry which is competitive if you mix socialism into the industrial policy. They have to be kept separate.
Mm. Do you feel, sir, that even while emerging through this COVID crisis, there needs to be a greater welfare state kind of role? I mean, for your sector, for example, it contributes 7.5% to GDP, and some other sectors like aviation have made the point that they need support for fixed costs, they need support for maintaining salaries. Do you think that kind of industry-wise package must be considered by the government at this point, especially in the next few quarters as we emerge from COVID?
Yes, I think government has to look at those things, but simultaneously, industrialists must also look to convince the people that they are not doing it for their personal benefit. That if their government gives concessions and tax concessions and various other ways of promoting industrial growth, that is not going to be because it's going to make rich even richer, consumption even more ostentatious.
Mm.
The country must be convinced that these concessions will lead only to the growth of the industry, the growth of the economy, and industrialists recognize the importance of creating a more egalitarian society.
Mm. That fear would be justified, though, Mr. Bhargava, would it not, in a situation where salary cuts have already begun across many industry verticals, and there is the threat of job loss as well? I mean, for the auto industry, for instance, 55% of the workers are contractual. Do you think there might be a big shake-up in terms of the employment figures as well for industries?
See, there again, in line with what I'm saying, we don't need to cut the wages of the lowest people in the run. The wages of people at the higher levels can certainly come down. And if you make cuts there, I don't think that problem of needing to reduce labor. Of course, we have to see how many people we need in line with the demand in the economy. But if government helps in creating demand by lowering taxes, industry must help by expanding production, which will mean that not only do you not have to lay off people, but you'll hire more people because growth is required, not growing personal profits.
Yeah. It's also come at an extremely tricky juncture for the auto industry itself, Mr. Bhargava. I mean, as you were pointing out earlier, it's been through several rough quarters, which estimates that there's going to be a drop of about 8.3% in terms of vehicle production in India in 2020. How bad will it get, to ask you candidly?
I am not in a position to foresee what is going to happen, but we will do whatever the government requires us to do. We'll make our best efforts to grow the industry. We are not a company where we work with high differences between the management and the workers. We are a fairly egalitarian kind of company. We will continue in that way and we'll try and maximize the benefits which we can give to the people, the workers, and customers and the economy.
Mm. There has been severe underutilization of capacity, though, Mr. Bhargava, as you pointed out, a function of the kind of demand that is in the market. Will that have to get squeezed further, you think?
It again depends on how demand creation happens. Yes, the demand creation is there. The supply side is not going to be a constraint.
Mm.
But if demand doesn't arise, then the industry will be in big trouble.
Which puts Maruti in a unique spot as well, Mr. Bhargav, because you've managed to actually do better than the industry over the last couple of months in terms of your numbers. Of course, the numbers for this month would be an anomaly for all auto industry players. What's the global and local sort of context that Maruti is putting into the next few months, and how it plans to see through 2020?
No, we have to now see how the lockdown is removed. As the Prime Minister said, it's probably going to be removed in a phased manner. And until we get to know exactly how we do it. But what is clear is that even after the lockdown is removed, the problem of the virus has not disappeared.
Yeah.
And every industry, I'm talking just of industry, will have to continue to take, and we will certainly do that, every possible measure to ensure the safety of our workmen and our employees. That is going to be a new dimension in the way work takes place in factories. Because, of course, we were doing safety measures earlier, but the coronavirus creates completely new dimension to the kind of safety measures that will be required in factories going forward for the next, I don't know how long.
Mm. And that will have to be done in an environment of financial firefighting as well, Mr. Bhargava. I mean, some estimates indicate that.
Yeah, but that, irrespective of the cost, that has to be done.
Yeah.
And the company is actually having every day, the managing director is having discussions with his team to working out exactly how, when we resume, what we should do so that this factor of safety is built into our entire way of life.
The question I was, about to ask you, sir, is your sense of the revenue loss that the auto industry might be facing. I mean, there are some estimates which put it at about, 1,300 to 1,500 crores per day. Would you say that's an accurate figure?
I really don't know at this point of time what the numbers are. And I don't think we should worry too much about numbers because companies have to manage with whatever the existing situation is.
Hmm.
You cannot, I mean, it's no point looking at that it's going to be 1,200 crores or 2,000 crores. What does it matter? You have to manage with what you have and what the situation on the ground is.
Hmm. There are interesting global parallels as well developing for the auto industry through this, Mr. Bhargav. For example, in China, they noticed that once they came out of the lockdown, there was actually greater demand for personal vehicles. Whereas in India, it tends to be a bit of a discretionary buy, something you postpone till when you have enough capital. Any global lines that you're being able to connect in terms of how this is playing out?
Again, we don't know. Some people say that after we come out of this lockdown and people start again buying things, there will be a bigger demand for cars because people will tend to avoid public transport
Okay.
and have their own private transport. Now, whether that's going to happen or not happen, I don't know. It's just one of those things which people talk about.
You've seen the 2008 global financial crisis, Mr. Bhargav. Maruti itself went through, a bit of a labor problem in 2011. Is this unlike something you've seen before in all the years and decades you've put into this industry? And
No, 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 not at all. I think what's happened is a totally different kind of situation. This is something which I think has never happened, at least in my lifetime, that I remember anything of this nature happening. When the Spanish flu took place, I don't know what happened, but there wasn't that kind of industry then anyway. But after that, I think this virus and the way it spreads and its impact on the people it infects, I think this is something which is unique.
are you truly hopeful, sir, that there will be, greater soul searching in terms of the egalitarian structures that you pointed to? I mean, Maruti's always been a great example, not just for the auto industry, but for how to structure business and management. But it hasn't quite worked in the Indian context.
I can only hope that people will, after what has happened, understand how we are all very closely interconnected. That it's not as if the very rich can isolate themselves from the rest of the country. The global situation is one of great interconnection. And I think people now need to realize that if they think that they can live in ivory towers of their own, it's not going to happen. I think it's necessary that people realize that the world is now almost a single place. And all people in this world need to be, at least reasonably looked after because some of these problems arise because of extreme poverty. It's whole migrant problem.
Yeah.
Now, it's arisen why? Because over 70 years, we could not find enough work and employment for people to stay in their areas and work there. Why did we have to create a situation, and which has been happening for decades, of hordes of people moving from one state to another state far away to find work? It's a sad commentary on our effort at development. And I think, today everybody is saying that we were callous about the migrant workers. Yeah, sure, they have suffered, but somebody needs to look what was the root cause of this. And the root cause of it was our failure to find employment for people uh, where they should have found employment. Why would people need to move from Bihar to Punjab? Tell me. Why should it happen? Why has it been happening?
Much soul searching indeed, Mr. Bhargav. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your
Not at
candor
all.
and your time today. Thank you for speaking with us.
Thank you. Thank you.